The apartment was small. So small that when Lena stretched her arms out wide, she could almost touch both walls of her bedroom. But she never complained. Not once. Because that tiny room held everything she ever loved. A bed with a mattress that dipped in the middle. A wooden shelf her mother had found on the street and painted white. And in the corner, sitting on an old plastic crate, was the thing that changed her life forever. It was a keyboard. Not a nice one. Not the kind you see in music stores with shiny keys and fancy buttons. This one was missing 3 keys. The letter E, the letter B, and one of the black keys near the middle. The plastic was cracked on the side, and sometimes when she pressed too hard, no sound came out at all. But to Lena, it was everything. She found it when she was 9 years old. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and she was walking home from school when she saw it sticking out of a dumpster behind the grocery store. Most kids would have walked past it. Most kids would not have seen anything special about a broken keyboard covered in coffee stains and dust. But Lena stopped. She stood there for a long time, just staring at it. Something in her chest felt tight, like the keyboard was calling to her. She pulled it out carefully, wiped it with her sleeve, and carried it home. It was heavier than she expected, and her arms ached by the time she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment. Her mother was still at work. She worked at the laundromat downstairs, folding clothes and sorting sheets for people who lived in nicer neighborhoods. She worked long hours, sometimes 12, sometimes 14. She did it all alone, ever since Lena's father left when Lena was just a baby. That night, Lena plugged in the keyboard and pressed a key. A sound came out. Not a beautiful sound. More like a tired hum. But it was enough. She smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. From that day on, Lena taught herself how to play. She did not have money for lessons. She did not have a teacher. She did not even have a book. All she had was the internet at the public library and an old phone her mother bought for $20 at a pawn shop. Every day after school, she would walk to the library and watch videos of people playing piano. She watched their fingers. She watched how they moved. She watched the way they closed their eyes when the music became too beautiful to see. Then she would go home and try to copy what she saw. It was hard. Harder than anything she had ever done. Some nights, she wanted to give up. Some nights, she would press the wrong key over and over again and feel like crying. But she never stopped. Because every time she got a song right, even just a small part of it, she felt something she could not explain. It was like flying. Like being free, like the tiny apartment and the broken keyboard and the missing keys did not matter anymore. Her mother noticed the change in her. She would come home from the laundromat, tired and smelling like detergent, and she would hear music coming from Lena's room. At first, it was simple songs, nursery rhymes, easy melodies, but as the months passed, the music became more complex, more beautiful. One night, her mother stood outside the door and listened to Lena play something she had never heard before. It was sad and powerful at the same time. When the song ended, her mother wiped her eyes and walked away quietly. She did not want Lena to see her cry. By the time Lena was 16, she could play pieces that most trained pianists struggled with. She had learned Chopin. She had learned Beethoven. She had learned Rachmaninoff. All on a broken keyboard with 3 missing keys, all in a tiny room above a laundromat, all without ever touching a real piano. Her high school had an old piano in the music room. It was out of tune and some of the keys stuck, but it was real. Lena would sneak in during lunch breaks and after school just to feel the weight of the keys under her fingers. It was so different from her keyboard at home. The sound was deeper, richer. It made her heart race every time she played. One afternoon, her music teacher walked in while she was playing. His name was Mr. Delgado, and he had been teaching music for over 30 years. He had seen many students come and go, some talented, some not, but he had never seen anything like Lena. He stood in the doorway and listened. He did not move. He barely breathed. When she finished, he walked over to her slowly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. Lena shrugged. "YouTube, mostly." And I have a keyboard at home. Mr. Delgado shook his head in disbelief. He had students who took private lessons for years and could not play half as well as this girl. He asked her to play something else. She played Chopin's Ballade. No one. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano, and she played it from memory, without a single mistake. That night, Mr. Delgado went home and could not sleep. He kept thinking about Lena, about her talent, about how unfair it was that a girl like her, with so much gift, had no way to show the world what she could do. Then, he remembered something. The Whitmore Young Artists Competition. It was one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the country. The winner would perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City. The winner would be seen by agents and record labels and music schools. It could change a person's life forever. The deadline for submissions was in 2 days. Mr. Delgado did not tell Lena what he was doing. He was afraid she would say no. He was afraid she would think she was not good enough, so he recorded her playing during one of her after-school sessions without her knowing. Then he sent the video to the competition committee with a short note explaining who she was. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at the laundromat. It was addressed to Lena. Her mother brought it upstairs, confused. They never got mail. Lena opened it with trembling hands. She read the first line. Then she read it again. Then she dropped the letter and covered her mouth with both hands. She had been accepted. Out of over 2,000 applicants from all over the country, she had been chosen as one of 20 finalists. She was going to New York City. She was going to compete at Carnegie Hall. Her mother picked up the letter and read it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then her mother pulled her into a hug so tight that Lena could barely breathe. They stood there in the middle of their tiny kitchen, holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. That night, Lena sat in front of her broken keyboard and played for hours. She played until her fingers hurt. She played until the sun came up, because for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her dreams were not too big for someone like her. She had no idea what was waiting for her in New York. She had no idea that in just a few weeks, she would face the hardest moment of her life. She had no idea that a famous man with a cruel smile would try to break her spirit in front of everyone. But she also had no idea just how strong she really was. Lena had never been on a train before. She had never left New Jersey before. So when she stepped off at Penn Station in New York City, the world felt like it was spinning too fast. People rushed past her in every direction. The noise was deafening. Announcements echoed through speakers she could not see. The smell of coffee and exhaust, and something sweet she could not name, filled the air. She stood frozen in the middle of it all, clutching her small suitcase with both hands, trying not to get swept away. Her mother had wanted to come with her. She had begged her boss for time off. But the laundromat was short-staffed and they could not afford to lose the income. So Lena made the trip alone, just her, a suitcase with 3 days' worth of clothes, and a heart full of hope and fear mixed together. She took the subway to the hotel where the competition had arranged for all the finalists to stay. It was nicer than any place she had ever been. The lobby had marble floors and chandeliers, and people in suits walking around like they belonged there. Lena walked to the front desk slowly, feeling like everyone was staring at her, like they could tell she did not fit in. The woman at the desk smiled politely and handed her a room key. 4th floor. Room 412. Lena took the elevator up and found her room. It was small but clean. There was a bed with white sheets, a television mounted on the wall, and a window that looked out at the brick wall of another building. She sat on the edge of the bed and called her mother. "I made it," she said. Her mother's voice cracked on the other end. "I am so proud of you, Mija. So proud." They talked for a few minutes. Her mother told her to eat something, to get some rest, to remember that no matter what happened, she had already won, just by being there. Lena said okay. She said she loved her. Then she hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The next morning was the welcome reception. It was held in a private room at Carnegie Hall, just down the hall from the famous Weil Recital Hall, where the competition would take place. Lena had spent an hour getting ready. She wore a dress her mother had bought from a thrift store and altered by hand. It was dark blue with small flowers on the hem. Her mother had stayed up late 2 nights in a row fixing the stitching and adjusting the fit. To Lena, it was the most beautiful dress in the world, but when she walked into the reception, she realized very quickly that she was different from everyone else. The other finalists wore clothes that looked brand new, expensive. Some of the girls had jewelry that sparkled under the lights. Some of the boys wore suits that fit them perfectly. They stood in small groups, laughing and talking like they had known each other for years. Many of them probably had. They came from music academies and conservatories. They had private teachers and coaches. They had performed in recitals and concerts since they were children. Lena stood near the entrance, holding a glass of water she did not drink, watching them. She did not know anyone. She did not know what to say. So she stayed quiet and tried to make herself as small as possible. That was when she saw him. He was tall, with silver hair slicked back, and a black suit that looked like it cost more than everything Lena owned combined. He walked through the room like he owned it. People stepped aside to let him pass. They smiled at him. They nodded at him. Some of them looked nervous just being near him. Lena heard someone whisper his name. Victor Ashworth. She recognized it immediately. Everyone who played piano knew who Victor Ashworth was. He was one of the most famous pianists in the world. He had won 3 Grammy Awards. He had performed for presidents and kings. He had been a child prodigy, playing at Carnegie Hall when he was only 12 years old. Now he was in his 60s, and he was one of the judges for this competition. Lena's heart began to race. She had watched videos of him playing online. His technique was flawless. His interpretations were legendary. To be judged by someone like him felt like an honor she did not deserve. She was still staring at him when he turned and looked directly at her. For a moment, she thought he might smile. She thought he might nod or say hello. But instead, his eyes moved slowly from her face to her dress to her shoes. Old shoes. Worn at the edges. The only nice pair she owned. He walked toward her. A few people followed him. Curious. Lena felt her throat go dry. She did not know what to do. Should she introduce herself? Should she say something about how much she admired his work? Before she could speak, Victor Ashworth picked up the program booklet from a nearby table. He flipped through the pages until he found her name. He read it out loud. Lena Torres. Self-taught pianist from Newark, New Jersey. He said the words slowly, like they were a joke. Like they were the funniest thing he had heard all day. Then he looked at her and smiled. But it was not a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that made her feel cold inside. Self-taught, he repeated. How charming. A few people nearby chuckled. Lena felt her face grow hot. Tell me, Victor continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. Do you even own a real piano? Or did you learn on one of those little toy keyboards children play with? More laughter. Louder this time. Lena opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her hands were shaking. Victor leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just enough to sound almost friendly, almost kind. But his eyes were cold. I do hope you will not embarrass yourself too badly up there, he said. This stage has hosted real musicians. Legends. People who have dedicated their entire lives to this craft. He paused and looked her up and down one more time. But I suppose everyone deserves a chance to dream, even if the dream is unrealistic. He turned and walked away without waiting for a response. The people around him followed, some of them glancing back at Lena with pity in their eyes. Others looked amused. One girl whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled. Lena stood there alone. Her glass of water trembled in her hand. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She set the glass down on the nearest table and walked out of the room as calmly as she could. She made it to the hallway. Then to the bathroom. She pushed open the door, stepped inside, and locked herself in a stall. Only then did she let the tears come. She cried harder than she had cried in years. She cried for her old dress that suddenly felt ugly. She cried for her worn shoes and her broken keyboard. and the 3 missing keys that she had practiced on for 7 years. She cried, because Victor Ashworth had looked at her like she was nothing. Like she did not belong. Like she was a joke. And the worst part was, a small voice inside her wondered if he was right. Maybe she did not belong here. Maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe Mr. Delgado should never have sent that video. Maybe she should just go home before the competition even started and save herself from more humiliation. She sat on the cold floor of that bathroom stall, hugging her knees to her chest, and felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Outside, the reception continued. People laughed and talked and clinked their glasses. The other finalists discussed their training and their teachers and their plans for the future. And Lena sat alone, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by ever believing she was good enough. Lena did not know how long she sat on that bathroom floor. It could have been 10 minutes. It could have been an hour. Time did not seem to matter anymore. All she could hear was Victor Ashworth's voice echoing in her head. Self-taught. How charming. This stage has hosted real musicians. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, she pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was her mother. 3 missed calls. Lena wiped her face with the back of her hand and answered. Mija, are you okay? You did not answer and I got worried. Lena opened her mouth to say she was fine. That everything was great. That the reception was wonderful and everyone was nice. But instead, something broke inside her. The words came pouring out before she could stop them. Mama, I want to come home. There was silence on the other end. Then her mother spoke softly. Lena told her everything. About the fancy hotel and the marble floors. About the other competitors in their expensive clothes. About Victor Ashworth and the way he looked at her. The way he spoke to her. The way everyone laughed. By the time she finished, she was crying again. He is right, Mama, she whispered. I do not belong here. These people have been training their whole lives. They have teachers and coaches and real pianos. I learned on a broken keyboard in my bedroom. I do not know what I was thinking. I should never have come. Her mother did not respond right away. Lena could hear her breathing on the other end. Could hear the faint sound of machines running in the background. Her mother was still at work, still folding other people's clothes, still doing what she had done every single day for as long as Lena could remember. When her mother finally spoke, her voice was calm, steady. But there was something underneath it. Something strong. Lina, listen to me carefully. Are you listening? Yes, Mama. That man. That famous man who laughed at you. Do you know why he did that? Lena sniffled. Because I am not good enough. No. Her mother's voice was firm now. He did it because he is afraid. Lena blinked. Afraid? Afraid of what? Afraid of you, Mija. Afraid of what you represent. He has spent his whole life in that world. He had the best teachers, the best schools, the best everything. And then you walk in. A girl from Newark, who taught herself to play on a broken keyboard. A girl who has never had a single lesson. And you are standing on the same stage as him. Do you understand what that means? Lena did not answer. She had never thought about it that way. Her mother continued. It means that everything he believes about himself is being challenged. If a girl like you can play as well as the people he trained with, then what does that say about him? What does that say about all his fancy training and expensive lessons? He is not laughing at you because you are weak. He is laughing at you because he is scared of how strong you are. Lena closed her eyes. She could feel her heart beating faster now. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like a small flame, flickering back to life. People like him have been laughing at people like us our whole lives, her mother said. They laughed at me when I came to this country with nothing. They laughed when I could not speak the language. They laughed when I worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, but I am still here, and so are you. Her mother's voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. You did not come this far to let some man in a fancy suit send you home. You did not spend 7 years practicing until your fingers bled just to quit now. That little girl who pulled a broken keyboard out of a dumpster and taught herself to play Chopin? She did not give up. And you are not going to give up either. Lena wiped her eyes. Her hands were still shaking, but something had shifted inside her. The heaviness in her chest felt a little lighter. You go up on that stage tomorrow, her mother said. And you play for every little girl who was ever told she was not good enough. You play for every person who ever had a dream that other people laughed at. You play for me, Mija, and you play for yourself, because you have earned the right to be there. Not because of money, not because of fancy schools, because of who you are. Lena took a deep breath. Then another. The tears had stopped now. In their place was something else. Something harder. Something fiercer. Okay. Mama, she said quietly. Okay, that is my girl. Her mother's voice was warm now. Proud. Now go wash your face. Drink some water. And practice. Practice until you cannot practice anymore. Show them who Lena Torres is. They said goodbye and hung up. Lena sat there for another moment, holding the phone against her chest. Then she stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to move. She walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, and splashed it on her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her makeup was smeared. But underneath all of that, she saw something she had almost forgotten. She saw the girl who found a broken keyboard in a dumpster and carried it home. The girl who practiced for hours every night while her mother worked downstairs. The girl who learned Chopin and Beethoven and Rachmaninoff without a single teacher. That girl was still there. She had always been there. Victor Ashworth did not know that girl. He had looked at her dress and her shoes and decided she was nothing. But he had not seen the years of struggle. The sacrifice, the love that went into every note she played. He did not know anything about her. And tomorrow, she was going to show him. Lena left the bathroom and walked back to her hotel room. She did not look at anyone. She did not care what they thought anymore. When she got to her room, she pulled out the small electronic keyboard she had brought with her. It was not her old one from home. That one was too broken to travel with. This was a cheap one she had borrowed from Mr. Delgado. It did not sound great. The keys were too light, and the speakers were tinny. But it was enough. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to play. She played the piece she had chosen for the competition, Rachmaninoff. One of the most difficult composers in the world. The kind of music that made your fingers ache and your heart race. She played it over and over again, finding the weak spots, fixing the mistakes, pushing herself harder than she ever had before. The hours passed. The sun went down. The city outside grew quiet. But Lena did not stop. She played until her fingers hurt. She played until her eyes burned from exhaustion. She played until the first light of morning crept through the window and painted the walls gold. She had not slept at all. But she did not feel tired. She felt awake. More awake than she had ever been in her life. Today was the day. Today she would walk onto that stage and sit at a piano that cost more than her apartment. Today she would play in front of judges who had spent their lives in a world she had only dreamed about. Today she would face Victor Ashworth again. But this time, she was ready. She was not going to play to prove him wrong. She was not going to play to impress anyone. She was going to play for the same reason she had always played. Because the music was the only thing that had ever made her feel free, and no one could take that away from her. The hallway backstage was long and quiet. Lena could hear her own footsteps echoing on the hard floor. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear the faint sound of applause coming from somewhere far away as another competitor finished their performance. She was next. There were 19 other finalists in the competition. All day long, they had taken turns walking onto that famous stage and playing their hearts out. Lena had watched some of them from the wings. They were incredible. Their fingers moved across the keys like water flowing over stones. Smooth. Effortless. Beautiful. Each one of them had trained for years. Each one of them belonged here, and now it was her turn. A woman with a clipboard and a headset approached her. "You are on in 5 minutes," she said. Wait here. Someone will come get you when it is time. Lena nodded. Her throat was too dry to speak. She stood alone in that hallway, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to remember how to breathe. She had not slept in over 30 hours. Her eyes burned. Her fingers were sore from practicing all night. But strangely, she did not feel tired. She felt something else entirely. Something electric. Like every nerve in her body was awake and waiting. She thought about her mother. Right now, she was probably sitting in the back room of the laundromat, watching the live stream on her old phone. The competition was being broadcast online for families and friends who could not attend. Lena imagined her mother leaning close to that tiny screen, holding her breath, waiting. She thought about Mr. Delgado. He had called her that morning to wish her luck. His voice had been shaky with emotion. "No matter what happens today," he had said, "you have already made me the proudest teacher in the world." Quote. She thought about the broken keyboard sitting in the corner of her bedroom back home. The one with 3 missing keys. The one that had started everything. And then, before she was ready, a stagehand appeared and motioned for her to follow. The walk to the stage felt like a dream. Her legs moved, but she could not feel them. The sounds around her faded into a dull hum. All she could see was the bright light ahead. The entrance to the stage. The entrance to everything she had ever wanted. She stepped out into the light. The Weil recital hall at Carnegie Hall was smaller than she had imagined, but it was beautiful. The walls were cream-colored with golden trim. The ceiling curved overhead like the inside of a seashell. Rows of red velvet seats stretched out before her, filled with people. Hundreds of them. All watching. All waiting. Lena walked toward the piano. It sat in the center of the stage, gleaming under the lights. A Steinway Grand. The most famous piano in the world. She had seen pictures of it online. She had dreamed about touching it, and now here it was, right in front of her. She sat down on the bench. The leather was cool beneath her. She adjusted the height slightly. She placed her fingers on the keys. They were smooth and heavy and perfect. Nothing like her keyboard at home. Nothing like anything she had ever touched. She looked out at the audience. In the front row, she saw the judges sitting with their notepads and pens. And there, in the center, was Victor Ashworth. He sat with his arms crossed, his expression bored, like he had already decided she was not worth his time. Like he was just waiting for her to fail so he could move on to someone more interesting. For a split second, Lena felt the fear rise up again. The doubt, the voice in her head that whispered she did not belong here. That she was just a girl from Newark with a broken keyboard and a borrowed dress. But then she closed her eyes, and she remembered her mother's words. Play for every little girl who was ever told she was not good enough. Lena took a deep breath. She let it out slowly, and then she began to play. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, No. 2, filled the hall. She had arranged it herself for solo piano. It was not supposed to be played this way. It was written for a full orchestra. But Lena had spent months figuring out how to capture the essence of it with just 2 hands, how to make one piano sound like 100 instruments. The music started soft, gentle, like a whisper in the dark. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys, drawing out each note, letting it hang in the air before the next one came. The audience was silent, not a single cough, not a single rustle, just the music and the stillness. Then the tempo began to build. The notes came faster now, stronger. The melody rose and fell like waves crashing against the shore. Lena's hands flew across the keyboard, hitting every note with precision and power. She did not think about technique. She did not think about the judges. She did not think about Victor Ashworth and his cold smile. She thought about her mother folding clothes at midnight. She thought about the dumpster where she found her keyboard. She thought about all the nights she practiced until her fingers bled. She thought about every person who had ever looked at her and seen nothing. And she poured all of it into the music. The middle section of the piece was the hardest. A cascade of notes that tumbled over each other like a waterfall. Most pianists simplified this part. They left out notes or slowed down the tempo to make it easier. But Lena played every single note, full speed, full power. Her fingers moved so fast, they were almost a blur. Someone in the audience gasped. She heard it but did not stop. She could not stop. The music had taken over now. It was bigger than her. Bigger than the stage. Bigger than anything. The final section began. The melody returned, but this time it was different. Sadder. More beautiful. Like the end of a long journey. Like coming home after being lost for years. Lena felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She kept playing. She kept breathing. She kept giving everything she had. The last chord rang out through the hall. Deep and full and final. Lena held her hands on the keys, letting the sound fade slowly into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The hall was completely still. Lena sat frozen at the piano, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that she had somehow made a terrible mistake. Then someone started clapping. One person, then two, then 10, then the entire hall erupted. People rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. It echoed off the walls and ceiling and filled every corner of the room. Some people were wiping their eyes. Some were shouting. A woman in the third row was openly crying, her hands pressed to her chest. Lena stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. She looked out at the crowd and saw faces she did not recognize. Strangers. But they were all looking at her like she had given them something precious, something they would never forget. She bowed. Once, twice. The applause did not stop. It kept going and going, washing over her like a wave of warmth, and then, almost without meaning to, she looked at Victor Ashworth. He was not clapping. He sat perfectly still in his seat. His arms no longer crossed. His face had changed. The boredom was gone. The smugness was gone. In its place was something Lena had never expected to see. He looked shaken. His lips were parted slightly. His eyes were wide. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Like everything he thought he knew had just been torn apart. Lena did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked off the stage. The sound of applause still thundering behind her. She had done it. She had shown them all. The waiting was the hardest part. After her performance, Lena sat in a small room backstage with the other finalists. No one spoke. They all stared at the floor or the walls or their own hands, waiting for the judges to make their decision. The air felt heavy. Every minute felt like an hour. Lena replayed her performance in her head, over and over. Had she played well enough? Had she made any mistakes she did not notice? The standing ovation had felt like a dream. But now, sitting in this quiet room, doubt began to creep back in. Maybe the applause was just politeness. Maybe the judges saw flaws that the audience did not. Maybe Victor Ashworth was right all along. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. It did not matter anymore. She had done her best. She had played with everything she had. Whatever happened next was out of her control. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the door opened and a woman stepped inside. She was holding a piece of paper in her hands. Her face gave nothing away. "The judges have made their decision," she said. "Please follow me to the stage for the announcement." The finalists stood up slowly and walked in a line back toward the stage. Lena's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands were cold and clammy. She wiped them on her dress and kept walking. The stage looked different now. The piano had been moved to the side. In its place was a podium with a microphone. The audience was back in their seats, buzzing with quiet conversation. Camera flashes went off as the finalists walked out and stood in a row facing the crowd. Lena found herself standing near the end of the line. She looked out at the sea of faces but could not focus on any of them. Everything felt blurry, distant, like she was watching herself from far away. An older man in a gray suit walked to the podium. He was the head of the competition committee. He thanked the sponsors and the judges and the families who had come to support the young musicians. He talked about the history of the competition and how proud they were of all 20 finalists. Lena barely heard any of it. She was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. Then the man opened an envelope. "In third place," he said, "from the Royal Conservatory of Toronto." A boy near the middle of the line stepped forward. The audience clapped. He shook hands with the man and received a small trophy. He looked happy but also a little disappointed. Third place was not what he had hoped for. In second place, from the Berlin Academy of Music, a girl near the front stepped forward. More applause. Another trophy. She smiled and waved at someone in the audience. Probably her family. Lena's heart was racing now. 2 spots left. First place and everyone else. She tried to keep her face calm, but her whole body was trembling. The man at the podium paused. He looked out at the audience, then down at the paper in his hands. A small smile crossed his face. "This year's competition was one of the closest in our 40-year history," he said. The judges deliberated for nearly 3 hours. But in the end, they reached a unanimous decision. Unanimous. The word echoed in Lena's mind. She did not know what that meant. Did it mean they all agreed she was not good enough? Did it mean they all agreed on someone else? The man continued. "For the first time ever, our winner received perfect scores from all 5 judges. This young musician delivered a performance that several of our judges described as one of the most moving they have ever witnessed." Lena felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin around her. "The first-place winner of this year's Whitmore Young Artists competition is..." He paused. The silence was unbearable. "Lena Torres, from Newark, New Jersey." For a moment, Lena did not move. She did not understand. She heard the words, but they did not make sense. Her name. He had said her name. But that could not be right. There must be some mistake. Then the applause started. Louder than before. Louder than anything she had ever heard. People were standing again. Someone was calling her name. The other finalists were stepping back, making room for her. She walked forward in a daze. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. When she reached the podium, the man shook her hand and placed a golden trophy in her arms. It was heavier than she expected, cold against her fingers, real. She looked out at the audience. Cameras flashed everywhere. People were cheering, some were crying, and somewhere in the back of the hall, she knew her mother was watching on a tiny phone screen, thousands of miles away, but closer than ever. The next few hours were a blur. Reporters surrounded her, asking questions she could barely answer. People she had never met shook her hand and told her she was brilliant. Photographers asked her to pose with her trophy. Music producers handed her business cards. It was overwhelming. Magical. Terrifying. And then, just when she thought the night could not get any more surreal, she saw him. Victor Ashworth was walking toward her. The crowd seemed to part around him. The noise faded to a hush. Everyone was watching. Waiting. Wondering what the famous pianist would say to the girl he had mocked just 2 days ago. Lena stood her ground. She held her trophy close to her chest and looked at him directly. She was not afraid anymore. She had nothing left to prove. Victor stopped a few feet in front of her. Up close, he looked older than he had at the reception. Tired. The arrogance in his eyes was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like humility. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victor Ashworth did something no one expected. He bowed his head slightly. When he looked up again, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I was wrong about you," he said. Lena did not respond. She just waited. "I have heard thousands of performances in my life," he continued. "Technically perfect, flawlessly executed. But I have never..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I have never heard anyone play with that much soul, that much truth. You did not just play the music, you became it." He extended his hand toward her. "I owe you an apology. What I said to you at the reception was cruel and unfair. You did not deserve that. And I was wrong. About everything." Lena looked at his hand. She thought about all the tears she had cried in that bathroom stall. She thought about the shame and the doubt and the pain he had caused her. Part of her wanted to walk away. Part of her wanted to make him feel as small as he had made her feel. But then she thought about her mother. About forgiveness. About the kind of person she wanted to be. She reached out and shook his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. That was all. She did not say she forgave him. She did not say it was okay. But she shook his hand, and she moved on. Because she had bigger things ahead of her than holding on to anger. 1 year later, Lena was a student at Juilliard on a full scholarship. She had signed a recording contract with a major label. Her first album debuted at #1 on the classical charts. But the thing she was most proud of was something else entirely. She had started a foundation. It collected donated instruments and gave them to kids in underserved communities. Kids who could not afford lessons. Kids who had dreams but no resources. Every keyboard came with a note attached. The note said the same thing every time. Your circumstances do not define your potential. Keep playing. The world is waiting to hear you. And sometimes, late at night, Lena would sit alone at her beautiful new piano and think about the broken keyboard that started it all. The one with 3 missing keys. The one she found in a dumpster on a cold November evening when she was just 9 years old. She still had it. She would never get rid of it, because that keyboard taught her the most important lesson of her life. It is not about where you start. It is about how far you are willing to go.